everybody. We're glad that you're here. We're going to be observing the Lord's Supper today. And we often have different aspects to a morning worship service, but I've stated this, I state this often, and so it's always foremost on my mind. I remember when I was just in my early teens, I haven't turned that camera on there, Danny, let me get that. This one's going, but not the camera. Folks that are viewing, let me get all my ducks in a row. Because I do appreciate the folks who take the time to be a part of our service electronically. Let me get back in position, pick up my train of thought. I'm finding more and more as I get older. I was just talking, Pat and I were talking about getting older, not that she's getting older, but I find sometimes when I'm trying to find my train of thought, I found that it's already left the station. We almost never did anything on Sunday morning, and yet we almost always found something to do that was fun and enjoyable among my friends on Saturday night and Sunday night. It was just another night where we didn't have to go to school that day. But we had a couple of our friends who had to go to church on every Sunday night. They went to church on Wednesday night. We made fun of them. And I remember when I became a Christian, I became interested in attending church on Sunday night. And so that was new to me. They did church at my church differently than they did on Sunday morning. But also, I remember one Sunday morning, shortly after I became a Christian, as I said, we didn't attend church very much at all. And we had never, the first person I ever saw baptized was the person who was baptized just before me. You're going to be baptized. They didn't explain it to me. They didn't describe it to me. They just gave me a towel and said, here, you're going to need this. And so I was in a group with a bunch of boys, and I knew that there were a bunch of girls over on the other side. And we were going to be baptized that night. And I'd never seen anybody baptized. His name was Jack Wright. He was my girlfriend's older brother. And as we went up some stairs, and he would go down into the baptistry. Just like that. At the Flint Baptist Church. And he slipped as he was going down into the water, and he did a half Nelson into the water and splashed the water out into the choir loft and up on the window. We didn't have a painting. We had a stained glass window. And just water went everywhere. He was a big fellow. Our pastor was waiting for him down in the water, and it just a cannonball. So I'm thinking, so this is baptism. But then I noticed how embarrassed he was and how angry the pastor seemed to be. He turned red in the face, and then he baptized him and said, well, maybe it's just that part. And so the very first person I ever saw baptized was that person, and then me. And then one morning I was in church, and they observed the Lord's Supper. And that looked like the silliest thing I'd ever seen in my life. What are we doing? What is this? The Lord's Supper? The Lord's Supper? We're going to eat? We're going to have supper? Just wait. And we had the Lord's Supper. Just, passing around the trays and everything. A little piece of cracker, a little cup of juice. Had no idea. And we kind of did it in the last 5 or 10 minutes. We finished up our Sunday morning service. Everything was done as we ordinary. And then everybody said, okay, everybody sit back down again after the invitation. We're going to have the Lord's Supper. And we took about 5 minutes and we did it. And so when I became a Christian, after I became a Christian, that was the first time I'd ever seen that. And so I had to figure out, I had to go ask a bunch of questions. And I found out there's a lot of things, a lot of different ways to believe about the Lord's Supper. And so when I became a pastor, every time we have the Lord's Supper, we don't tack it on to anything. We don't just do it at the end or say, well, here's something extra. I like to just do it just like this, where it's all we do. As as much as possible. And so that's what we're going to do today. Now, we believe that on the night that Jesus was arrested, when they were going to arrest him and he was going to spend the night at Caiaphas' house, the next morning they were taken before Pilate, and then that day, Friday, he would be crucified, and then they would put him in the tomb. And on Easter Sunday, he would rise. That's our Christmas story. That's the story of Jesus for us. But on that last night, he was with his disciples. It's called the Last Supper. And they were observing Passover, which was a Jewish feast. And then Jesus said, we're not going to do Passover anymore, which is really, really, really odd for Jewish people. He took a little piece of bread, and he broke the bread up, and he gave all his disciples bread. He says, I want you to eat that little piece of bread. They did. And then he took one cup, and he passed it around. He told them all to take a sip. And they took a sip of the wine that they had there. We're going to use grape juice. And Jesus said, my body is going to be punished. It's a part of God's plan for you. And I'm going to actually shed my blood. I'm going to die. And he says, that's what this bread and this juice represents. And he says, this is something I want you to do. Eat this bread and drink this juice from now on until I come back. One day, Jesus is going to return. Just like he was born on Christmas night, Jesus is going to return someday. He says, do this every once in a while. He says, as often as you do it, and remember me. That's why in front of this table, see right here? It says, this do in remembrance of me. That's King James for saying do this. Do this. That's what we're doing. It's a way of reminding us of that night. What we're supposed to do is imagine ourselves with Jesus on that night. And he said, this has meaning. This means something. This is to help you remember this night. And so that's the reason we do that. Now, there are some Christians and churches who believe that you should only observe this if you are a member of that specific church. But we don't believe that here at Walnut Grove. If you're a Christian, you're welcome to observe this. We have some visitors and guests here with us this morning, and we're going to make this where you can participate if you wish. But if you choose not to, that's fine. Nobody's going to even notice. But if you are a Christian, you believe in Jesus, and you wish to participate with this, you're welcome to do so. And nobody's going to smack your hand or say no or refuse you. In other words, we're going to let you serve yourself today. These little wafers, I'm just going to take one. I put these out with a mask, a glove on, and I'm just going to take this top napkin right here. We started using these last year. It's just a little plastic cup that has grape juice in it, and in the top right here, it has a little wafer. This little tab right here is divided into a clear piece and a foil piece. You can separate them. My eyesight's not as good as it used to be, but I've got it separated right there right now. This little tab that sticks out, if you pull that clear piece up and pull it off, it will show you the wafer right there. Little piece of bread. Under that plastic, there's the plastic piece, clear plastic, and there's the wafer. If you get the rest of that, the foil, be very careful because it is juice. If you'll pull that foil off, which is the next layer, you can see the little cup of juice right there. You'll need to take, we're going to ask in just a moment, if you want to, during a time of prayer, if you would like to participate today, and if you'd like to observe, I'd like you to get up from where you're sitting, come down here and take a napkin and get one of these and just take it back to your seat, and we will take the bread together and then drink the juice together. Mine is right there. So you may still have many questions about what the Lord's Supper means and what it's about. Some Christians believe that it contains grace. In other words, if you do this, something spiritual happens to you. It's a part of your salvation. It's a part of what makes you a Christian. Baptists don't believe that. We simply believe what Jesus said that night. It's a way of remembering Him. It's a little bit difficult in these times to observe this and to do it safely. Many things have probably changed in your life. They may change back. A lot of things will never change back again. Life was going to change for these people who were Jesus' disciples. They were going to see Him for just a little while after the resurrection. But for 3.5 years, they had been with Him every day. That was going to change. He had talked with them and been with them. They traveled together. That was going to be different. Their lives were going to change. They were probably never going to observe another Passover as Jewish people. They might still go to synagogue just simply because it was their custom or their habit. Now they were going to go to church, which was different. Their lives changed dramatically when they first met Jesus. They had been tax collectors and businessmen and fishers for fish. And now they were disciples and apostles. They were Christians. It changed their life completely. It caused them to have to leave their homes and their families and their friends. Their lives were about to change again. Important things are going to happen in your life that's going to make everything change. And you can spend your whole life and all of your energy trying to get back to the way things were. But sometimes that's not what God wants you to do. He wants you to go on, to move forward, and to serve Him in the future. Whatever has changed in your life, Jesus said, you're going to be going, if you know the history or the traditions about what happened to the disciples, they were scattered to the four winds, and everywhere they went, they carried the gospel, the story of Jesus. Jesus said a lot of things are going to change. He says, this is something that I want to stay the same. Do this, like this, until I return. You be the judge today. What we're going to do is I'm going to lead us in a word of prayer, and then I just want us to continue to pray. And we're going to pray for 4 or 5 minutes. And if you wish to participate with us today, everyone here is invited to come down here to take a tissue or a napkin or both and take one back to your seat and just wait until everyone has been served. And then I'll conclude the prayer and we'll take the bread together, we'll drink the juice together, and I hope that you will imagine yourself there with Jesus that night. They were all scared to death about what was going to happen. That's the way of life. We never know what's going to happen next. They knew that they were all in danger, and that any of them could be no longer after the coming days. But they became some of the most courageous people the world has ever known because of their faith in Christ. Let's pray together this morning. Would you pray with me? Father, I want to thank you for your goodness to us and your grace in our lives. Help us to remember that night and what was on your heart and mind. And then that you gave your body, you gave your life, every drop of life's blood for us, so that everything that stands between us and God can be forgiven and removed. Thank you for that. Now with heads still bowed and eyes closed, if you would, just as you wish, at your own timing, just come down to the communion table and take your own container of the elements and take them back to your seat, and we'll take of them together in just a moment. Heads are bowed and eyes are closed. If you would just come in the privacy of this moment, the quietness, you're welcome to observe. would take that container then, and don't be too worried about fiddling or fumbling with that. If it doesn't yield to you, that's all right. But peel that top clear layer off there. If you would find that wafer. I've taken the Lord's Supper in a lot of different kinds of churches and a lot of different circumstances and situations. Sometimes very far away from home and sometimes very far away from any church. Most memorable time was in a village in Bain, India, many years ago, in a little thatch hut with a dirt floor. My friends and I were foolishly dressed in our Sunday finery, while all of the people that lived in the village were there, dressed in their ordinary, everyday clothes. They unwrapped a piece of loaf of bread from, or not loaf of bread, but a loaf of bread, and passed it around, and everybody pinched off a little piece of bread, ate it, and then they had a single cup. Someone had found a goblet somehow. Another was probably the finest, most ornate thing in this whole village, and it had Lord knows what in it, and we all took a sip. But there was a gentleman who passed it around. He had a little cloth, and he did kind of like we did when we were kids, sharing a RC. He wiped the lid, wiped the cusp before passing it on. Jesus said, "This is my body, which is broken for you." A common cup, still often used today. Jesus said, "This is my blood, the New Testament. Drink ye all of it." If you got that napkin there, just kind of ball things up. And leave that behind. And we will clean up after you. We'll be happy to do that for you. No need you have to fiddle with that. Just leave it in your pew. If you've got it where it's not going to leak or leave a stain, just leave that behind. Some of our church members are in line to receive their vaccination. Some of you may already have received your vaccination. Terry and I have had the infusion. And we can't have the vaccination until, I think, 90 days after our infusion. That's why we're glowing. Carice is glowing. Pray for Carice. They're going to give birth very soon. She's a beautiful mother. Brian looks the same. One of their greatest friends, Davida. Is it Olivia? Lily. Can I call you Olivia? That's my great-grandmother's name. Lily. Came to be a part of the celebration. We celebrated yesterday. All right. God bless you all. Do you have anything this morning? Is there anything on your heart and mind? All right. God bless you all. Be careful as you go. Please come back and be with us next Sunday. Randy has told me he's very seldom wrong. And he's not married, so he doesn't really have anybody to tell him when he's right and wrong, or to tell him that he's wrong all the time. But he says, I believe that we adjust our time. We spring forward next Saturday night. Is that what you have heard? See, that's one of the privileges of not being married, Randy, is that you can be right occasionally. All right? God bless you all. Be careful as you go. You are dismissed. God bless you. Thank you for those of you who've tuned in electronically. We welcome your presence as well.